Hello and welcome to our this afternoon's presentation from Intelligent Land Investments Group on our Chrisswell energy storage project. I am Andrew Hughes. I'm the PR and media manager for Intelligent Land Investments Group. We also have my colleague Greg Templeton, who's on the call as well on the live stream today.
Hi,
hi Greg. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear you fine, Andy? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and together we're going to run through a presentation of the project that we have at Chrisswell Farm. So we'll give everyone a wee minute to get on so they can find the web page and hopefully run through a few ways you can get in contact with us as well. So we'll run through the presentation. I'll tell you a little bit about our company, a little bit about energy storage, why we need energy storage in general, why we need it in this location, and then some planning drawings of the layout so you can get an idea of what it is we're actually proposing. So hopefully if you're on a phone or a mobile device, you should be able to see an ask us a question box where you can just put in a question into there and send that to us, and myself or Greg will answer that as we go along. If you can't see that chat box, there is my mobile numbers on the screen there as well, so you can contact me by mobile, or myself and Greg's email addresses are there too. So if you can't see the chat box but you still want to get in contact with us, you can do it in either of those two methods as well. So this is in place of a public meeting where we would normally book a hall close to Chrisswell Farm, and we would come up and see everyone face to face. Obviously, with the COVID situation as it is, that's not been possible for over a year now. So we've been hosting these meetings from a home, in effect. I'm in my house, Greg's at his house, and we present it in this online fashion that we've agreed with the council. So that's what we're going to do today, and it seems to work quite well. So if anyone's got any questions, if you're there, you want to pop in and say hello, and then we know you're listening.
I have a question, Andy.
Go for it, Greg.
If you don't mind, could you send me the link, the public link that the people will be accessing today?
Yes, of course, can. Now, the link's been advertised in the local paper, so hopefully people have managed to find that. And it's also been advertised on Inverclyde's website too. So hopefully, and we've sent it to the community councils as well. So hopefully we get everyone's had a good opportunity to see that and those events on. So yeah, I'll just send you that over now, Greg. There you go. So you can keep an eye.
What I'll do, Andy, is I'll write a note there so that people can see where the comment section is.
Yeah.
And I'll just invite comments and questions, and I'll keep an eye on that as we progress and answer any questions that come up there. I think as well, Andy, at the question and answer section for this first presentation, I'll try and think of some of the types of questions we usually get at these events, and we can possibly run through some of those.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because sometimes people aren't available to watch this live, and this is going to be available on the website for at least the next couple of months. So before the application goes into planning, so anyone who's tuning in after the fact on catch up, then that's handy to have those kind of questions, Craig. So yeah, it's a really good idea, mate.
Cool, I'll do that just now. Just I'm going to put an introductory note on the email, on the website, sorry, just to welcome people.
Brilliant. You may hear my dog barking in the background, so apologies. He's sleeping at the moment, but let's hope it stays that way. It's the joys of doing these things from home. So apologies in advance if the dog starts barking. But I think we'll wait till 3:10 is normally when we start these things. And then every sort of half hour after that, we do a presentation. So we've got one at 3:10, then 4:45, then 4:15, then 4:45, 5:15. You get the idea, all the way up to kind of 6:45 would be the last presentation tonight. And we just basically do the same presentation again and again. And answer as many questions as we can, so if anyone's maybe not available at the moment, they may be working, or they might be available now but not later. So we kind of try and replicate the format that we have when we're face to face, which is very much like that, where there's kind of groups of people that come in every sort of half an hour or something like that, and we do a short presentation and sort of redo that presentation to them again and again, so that everybody gets a good idea of what it is we're doing. Is there anything I've forgotten, Greg, or anything I've missed, do you think?
No, you've covered everything, Andy.
Sorry, on you go.
I'm just adding a note to invite people to put questions on the questions section, explaining that we'll answer those at the end, and saying that we're going to rerun through the presentation sort of throughout our time here today, and that it'll be available online. So I'm just covering some of what you've already said.
Yeah. And the other thing I would state is that any comments you make to us in the chat, or that's another thing I didn't mention, is that we have, if you scroll down on the page where you're watching this from, there is a presentation. So that'll be uploaded later on today or tomorrow. The presentation I'm going to run it through, and you can download that and see all the slides, and they'll be up for until the project goes into planning. And there's also a questionnaire form as well, where you can give us some feedback. We ask you sort of your details and give you some questions that you give us any suggestions or anything you like or don't like about the project, if you understood it, and what your thoughts are in general on it. So it would be really helpful if you could fill that in. And the reason we get these kind of questionnaires is so that we can pull together, get a feel for what the local community think of it, and if there's anything that we can change, that people suggest, we will do that. And just to state as well that any comments you make to us are not comments to Inverclyde Council. You'd have an opportunity to make a formal sort of representation to the council when the planning application goes live in the coming months. So yeah, I think that's really it, Greg, isn't it? So what I'll do is I'll make this full screen, because sometimes it's easier to see everything. So, and I think with that, I'll just start in at the presentation, unless there's anything you want to add, Greg, for us before I start. There we go. Just in time. There's the dog.
I'll just reiterate what the dog says, I think. Hi there to anyone who's joined us here for the Chrisswell Energy Storage Project public consultation. So you can see on the screen there, we're going to be running presentations. It's a short presentation, so we're running the presentation a few times over the course of the evening, up to 7 p.m. This evening, and we'll also have question and answer sessions between each one, so that if anyone has any questions, we can answer them. My colleague Andrew Hughes, who's the PR and media manager, he'll be taking you through the presentation. He has control of the slides just now. So, Greg. Hi, Andy. I'm just giving a short introduction to what you're about to do. So Andy's going to run through the slides of the presentation. That will give you a bit of information about the company, a little bit about what is energy storage, because although they're becoming quite common now, it's often something that people, it's a new technology to a lot of people. So we're going to run through what that is, and then we're going to look at the specifics of the site in question and the location, why we chose that site, and exactly what is being proposed. And then we'll conclude with some questions, if there are any questions. And if not, we'll run through some of the types of typical questions that we get asked at these public events, and that will hopefully answer some of the questions that you've maybe got. So Andy, if you want to start.
Yep, that's great, Greg, thank you. Yeah. So let's get this up here. So yeah, so I'm just going to run through, as Greg explained, a short presentation on the project. So what is the project? So it's a 49.9 megawatt energy storage facility made up of battery storage containers. So in effect, these are kind of shipping containers that have inside them kind of racks and racks of small battery units that make up a full container. And I think there's 54 of those on the site. So you've got the containers. We've also got associated equipment. So that's kind of inverters and transformers as well. There's an access track. There's a small meter building, which contains a kind of it's kind of like a small substation building for all the equipment we need to get the power to and from the grid. There's some substantial fencing to screen the project, and there's going to be some new trees planted as well to help with that screening. So that's kind of the general kind of bones of the project. But in essence, what projects like these do is we store excess power from the grid, and then we put that electricity back into the grid when it is required. So in general, that's coming from renewable energy projects. So if you've ever drove by a wind farm and you've seen some of the wind turbines are spinning and some of them aren't spinning, you're thinking, wonder why that is. And normally that's because we don't need all the power from all the turbines. So a lot of the time, turbines will be asked to switch off, and they're actually paid a premium for doing that. So that power actually goes to waste. That potential renewable energy is wasted. So what projects like ours do is we have an opportunity to store that power and then put it back into the grid when it is required, and it helps balance supply and demand for the grid. But I'll go into that in a little more detail in one of the further slides. So who are Intelligent Land Investments Group? So we're an energy storage development company based in Hamilton in South Lanarkshire. The energy storage side of things started in 2017. Before that, we were involved in the feed-in tariff, sort of smaller scale renewable projects, or single turbines, and river schemes, hydro schemes, and also some solar as well. So we were involved in that for nearly 10 years in the kind of renewable sector. And we quickly became apparent to us that with all this new renewable power going online, we were going to be needing energy storage. So in 2017, we started off with the mission of bringing 2 gigawatts of power to 2 gigawatts of energy storage to Scotland, and we were going to do that by developing 3 pump storage hydro projects, all over 450 megawatts. We actually just got one of them through planning yesterday, Red John, on the shores of Loch Ness. So that's one that's been in the press today, and we've got 1 gigawatt of battery storage that we're also doing, of which Chrisswell would be part of. So why is it needed? Why do we need these projects? So Scotland's got a target of net zero by 2045. So it's an ambitious target. And to do that, we're going to have to increase the amount of renewable energy that we have, not just in Scotland, but across the UK. And the big problem that you have with renewable energy is that it's intermittent. So it only works when the sun shines or when the wind blows, and you can't switch it on and off basically to meet demand. So a lot of the time, what we've done previously to this is when renewable energy is not available, we've turned up the gas or the coal or the nuclear to make up the difference. But a lot of these kind of older generators, fossil fuel generators and nuclear, are going offline. These are coming to the end of their shelf life, and they're not going to be renewed, a lot of them. So what that means is that we're becoming more and more reliant on this intermittent power source. And the way to get around that is to increase the amount of energy storage that we have. So National Grid ESO, which kind of operate the grid system, they've estimated that we could be needing up to 40 gigawatts of energy storage by 2050. Currently have about 4.5 gigawatts of energy storage. So we've got 10 times, we need 10 times more than what we currently have. So the Scottish government are kind of broadly supportive of these projects, and they realise that it's in line with what they're looking to do with renewable energy, is that we need to have energy storage at a large scale. So they're broadly supportive of projects like this. So why in this location? So why do we need why are we at the farm at Chrisswell? And the reason is that it's land that's located next to the Spango Valley grid supply point. And a grid supply point is basically a hub for the grid. So it's a large substation where transmission power comes in pylons. It gets broken at high voltages, gets broken down into smaller voltages, out to smaller substations, and then eventually down the wires to your house and to your businesses. So it's a hub for the grid, and it's a perfect location for us to kind of add in that kind of 49.9 megawatts of energy storage that we're proposing. Now, the reason why that we're in this location is that there is grid available at the grid supply point at Spango Valley, and a lot of the people, although there's a lot of grid supply points in Scotland, a lot of them are full capacity, so there's no scope for us to put any energy storage into them. But Spango Valley is one of the ones that does have that capacity, so that's why we're at this location. So here's a location plan. I've just realised that we've got the slightly wrong location plan there, but I will give you a good description of where that is. So we've got the site layout here, which gives you the kind of the whereabouts that we are. So we are off the A78 on the Inverkip Road. In fact, can you just hold this presentation for 2 seconds while I just amend this? Apologies for this. Let's remove that there. And if you can just bear with me for 2 seconds.
So Andy, you're just updating the location plan just so that everyone can see exactly where we're talking about. Yeah, okay. And because often when we get asked, when we hold the public events, very often people's first question is, where is this in relation to my house? And they want to get their bearings, they want to understand where the project is. So we have a close-up plan which shows the layout of the scheme, but we also have a wider plan that shows the sort of wider context, shows the landscape that it's in, and you'll hopefully be able to get your bearings. If we can't get that in time, I think we'll be able to share a screen later on in the presentation where we could look at we could show it on sort of Google Earth. We could zoom into the right place there. There's just been a bit of a technical glitch with the slides, and it's got the wrong slide there. So I'm just give Andy a few moments while he tries to update that. And like I say, if we can't get that updated just now, we will show a map, maybe at the end of the presentation at the question and answer section. That'll give you exactly where it is. We'll also update the presentation for download so that you have the right map there. So, Andy, are you finding that okay? Yep. Okay, so that's a thumbs up from Andy. So we'll start sharing the screen again in a moment, and Andy will get back to the slide. So we're about to show you where the project is located.
So apologies about that. I just realised we had a bit of a technical glitch there with the plan. Yep, so this is the project at Chrisswell Farm. So if you can look, it's beside the A78. It's kind of outlined in red. If I could just move the cursor over it for you there. So hopefully you can see that okay. So that's the outline of the planning boundary. So that's the area that we're going to be putting the project in. So the site's kind of a rough grazing field at the moment beside the A78 Inverkip Road dual carriageway. We're around 2 kilometres from Inverkip and around 2 kilometres from Braeside at the edge of Greenock. The location is just across the road from the kind of former IBM site. The closest houses are Dunrod Farm to the south and Well Yard to the north, each over 300 metres away. So we're a good distance from any kind of other properties. So hopefully that gives you an idea of where we are. If you have a look, you can see the kind of the old IBM factory there on the kind to the northeast. And the Chrisswell farm is just right there. So that gives you an idea of whereabouts the location. So the next slide gives you a kind of a planning kind of view of what the layout's going to be like. So we've got 54 energy storage units in total. So those are marked as green rectangles. So hopefully you can see them. So they're the kind of shipping containers I was talking about. And interspaced in between them, we've got 15 transformers and converters, which help break the power down from the batteries and take it to the small substation that's in this building as well, and to the grid and back. So a major part of this development is going to be the screening that we put in place to kind of to make sure the project's got as low visibility as possible. So there's existing hedgerows that are going to be retained, and a belt of new trees, planted kind of native broadleaf trees, is going to be proposed along the roadside to screen the development. And these will be planted as large specimens between 1.5 to 2 meters tall. So already those will be at a good height. Now, on the outside of that, if you can see, there's a kind of pink line. Hopefully you can make that out just here along the kind of boundary. And that's a 3 meter high wooden fence as well that kind of screens the project also. There's an access track coming through the middle of the development down to the small substation that we have here, the meter building, which takes the power to and from the grid.
So it's worth, Andy, just pointing out that the actual battery compound is contained within that pink line.
Yes.
It's a sort of unusual shape. So it's not the full red line boundary of the application, of the plan application.
Not at all, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then outside of that compound area, we've got the landscaping, which is shown sort of hatched green area there. And there's also a SUDS, which is suburban drainage, which is that sort of blue area which is marked there. And that's essentially just to make sure that there's because we're creating a kind of hard standing for the access road that's in here, that it gives the water somewhere to go and go into the sort of percolates into the ground, so to ensure that there's no flooding caused by the project on anyone else's land. And that's a fairly standard thing that you get in most developments nowadays.
Great, thanks, Greg. So I'll just continue with the slides as we've got them. So the next slide kind of gives you a view of the actual energy storage units. So those are steel kind of shipping containers. They're 13 meters by 2.5 meters by 2.6 meters high. And those contain solid state lithium batteries. So that's the technology that's used on most other battery storage UK and worldwide.
Yeah, so it's worth just saying as well, Andy, sometimes people look at these drawings, they're engineering drawings, so they can be difficult to read. So the first sort of rectangle that you see, the sort of vertical rectangle that's there, that shows that's a sort of plan view of the container, a sort of view from above of the container. The lower one that's more of a square, that's if you were looking at the end of the container, and the longer one above that is if you were looking at the side of the container. But it's essentially like a big shipping container. It's got some sizes on it here. So it's marked on that it's 2.6 meters high. So to give people an idea of how high that is, so a standard living room ceiling is about 2.4 meters high. A doorway is about 2.1 meters high. So it's a little higher than your living room ceiling, essentially, if it's a fairly modern house. Okay. So that gives people an idea of the scale of each container. It's
Great.
worth also
Thanks, Greg.
pointing out, Andy, that the fence is taller, so it's a 3-meter fence. So you shouldn't be able to see anything sort of poking above the fence line. It's screened by the timber fence and also by the planting outside. That's me done, Andy. So it's maybe just worth me also mentioning, people might be reading the slides as well. So it says here that these are solid state lithium batteries. That's the type of batteries that you get like in your mobile phone that you maybe carry about. It's not a battery that has liquid. So some people imagine like a car battery. It's not like a car battery. It's more a battery like you would have in your phone or maybe on a laptop. And it's they're put on racks and shelves, and they look a little bit like computer hard drives almost, and they are contained within inside the shipping container, and then that sort of climate is controlled, keeps the rain off them. There's fire suppressants inside, and there's sort of air conditioning units that if we're ever lucky enough that it gets hot in Scotland, then they would come on just to cool the batteries down and keep them at the optimum operating temperature. Unfortunately, Andy has control of the slides, so I can't click us on to the next slide. We're having a couple of little technical glitches today. I'm sure Andy's clicking away, trying to get it to the next slide. I'm not sure how much I can say at the moment until we get on to that next slide, so I hope you'll just bear with us.
Hi, Greg. Hi. Sorry about that.
Hi, Andy. I assumed you were just caught up with something there. I spoke a little bit about lithium batteries, which is actually one of the questions that people ask is what does that mean, lithium battery? So I just explained that it's a type of battery essentially that you have in your mobile phone, but a bit bigger. And that we inside the containers, these batteries, they look a bit like computer hard drives on shelves. They're all stacked up within the containers, and then that's sort of climate controlled by the air conditioning that comes into effect if it gets too hot, and it cools it back to the optimum temperature. So ready for the next slide.
Cool. So this is a slide that shows the inverters, converters and transformers that are kind of interspaced in between the battery storage units. So like I said in one of the previous slides, there's 15 of those. So I think there's one for every 4 containers that we have, roughly, something like roughly around about that. And those help get the power to and from the batteries in a form that can go into the substation and then on into the grid. So those converters they're roughly size and shape as the containers that we have. So the power converters, which are the kind of the if you have a look, they look like small cabinets together. Those are each around about 1.6 by 1.4 meters. Greg, I'm just getting a call here I need to take, if that's okay. If you could, sorry.
I can talk through what's on the screen just now, Andy. So Andy was saying these the containers, they look like cabinets. They look a little bit like the kind of green cabinets you get for telephone communications that often at the end of people's streets. They're 1.6 meters by 1.4 meters, but quite tall, 2.6 meters tall. So again, that's about the same size as the containers that we showed a few moments ago. The transformers are the bits at the end of those, and they're a little taller than that, but all still under the height of the fence that surrounds the compound. So together, these power converters and transformers, when they're packaged, when they're sort of put next to one another, they're roughly the same size as the container that you'll see on the plan. We have a note here that the final equipment might vary slightly from what's shown. So at the moment, there are various producers of battery technology, and the batteries, the batteries are always sort of advancing, and there's improvements made to the technology. And so when it comes to actually developing out the proposals, we get a detailed design prepared by the battery manufacturer that we're going ahead with, using the current sort of best technology. And so the layout might vary slightly, but they're all basically along a very similar line. So the dimensions might vary slightly, or things might need to be spaced slightly closer together or slightly further apart within the compound. But what you'll see sort of externally won't change. It will all be it'll all look exactly the same to all extents and purposes to anyone looking from the outside into the development. Now, if I could maybe talk about something else that was on one of the other slides, which was to do with the number of megawatts that we produce. So another question that we're often asked at public events is sort of people don't have an idea of what 1 megawatt represents. So the way to think about it is the smallest unit of measurement that we're used to using is maybe like you hear that there's light bulbs are 40 watts or 100 watts. So that's measured in single watts. But then you get household appliances that are sometimes measured in kilowatts. So that's 1,000 times 1 watt. And then when you're looking at multiple houses or big developments, you get up to megawatts. Now, we used to, as a company, we were involved in some wind farm developments, and the smaller of the turbines that we used there was about 1/4 of a megawatt, and the larger of the turbines we used there was about 1/2 a megawatt. But the big turbines you see now in wind farms, they can be more than a megawatt, and maybe 3 megawatts for some of the larger turbines now. But this project can store 50 megawatts of energy, which is, each megawatt is 1,000 times a kilowatt, which is 1,000 times a watt, and that's where you get the megawatt from. So it is, although it's quite a small footprint of the proposal, it does store a lot of energy, and it is able to, as Andy said at the start, use that spare energy that the wind turbines and solar farms and offshore wind are producing when it's not needed. This project allows us to store that for when it is needed.
That's great.
So Andy was just talked through this slide already, so if you want to go on to the next one.
Yeah, I'll move on to the next one. Yeah, so so as part of the compound, there is a small substation building. It's kind of laid out in this drawing here, and it's a prefab glass reinforced plastic is a kind of the material it's from. It's 10 meters by 6 meters by 3.2 meters high, with a colour that was going to be agreed with the council. So that's really, like I said, this contains all the equipment that breaks the power down from the batteries, that it can be put back into the grid, and from the grid back into the batteries again. So that's all contained in the actual compound. This is a kind of more kind of detailed look at the fencing that we have. So there's a a wooden mesh fence that's going to be up, that's 3 meters high. There's going to be some security cameras around the outsides of that. And then outside of that, there's a 1.2 meter high post and wire stock fence. And like we've shown in the previous slides, this will all be screened by the existing tree bank that's there and the new tree planting that we're going to put as well. So really, as we're trying to make the project as the visual impact from the project as minimal as possible. Don't think would there be anything you'd add to that, Greg? Nope. Okay, yeah. So that's really the presentation. So if anyone's got any questions, I can't. Greg will let me know if there's any in the chat there, and I can certainly answer those as we go along here. It's my dog making an appearance here. Right. Right. Hi, so I can't see, I don't see any questions that are up at the moment. I haven't received anything by text or by email. There doesn't seem to be anyone on the chat at the moment either. So if there's nothing, no one else there, what I'll do is we will come back for the next presentation at quarter to 4 in 5 minutes' time. Thank you for listening. Hi there, and welcome everyone who's tuned in to watch our presentation of our Chrisswell Energy Storage Project in Burkett. I'm Andrew Hughes, the PR manager. Let me try that again. I'm Andrew Hughes. I'm the PR and media manager for Intelligent Land Investment Group. And we also have Greg Templeton, our planning manager, on the call as well. Hi, Greg.
Hi there.
Hi. And this presentation that we're doing tonight is part of our planning process. Usually what we will do, actually, Greg, there's a call I really need to take.
Yeah, sure, I can talk through this first, but Andy. So usually what we do is we would hire a local hall, and we would put an advert in the local paper to say when we were holding the event, interested parties would come along, and we could show them our presentation, show them the proposals. We would have a chat to people to explain what the proposals are, and hopefully get some feedback from people. So what we've done in the past, we've shown the presentation to people, and they've maybe brought something to our attention, or they've recommended changes to the proposals, and if we can incorporate those changes, then we like to do that before the plans are finalised for submission to the planning authority. So this is part of the planning process, but it is not yet a formal planning application to the council. Because we're over 20 megawatts, we are classed as a major development, and major developments have to go through a slightly different procedure when they're going through planning, which is right. There's a greater focus on public consultation, and there's the consultation's a bit wider. Planners look at it in sort of greater detail, and that's right because of the scale of the project. So we hold a public consultation event and try and get some feedback from people, and then we produce a final design which is submitted to the planning authority. Now, because of COVID, the Scottish Government discouraging mass events and indoor events, so they're encouraging people instead to hold online public consultations. So what we've tried to do is set up a website where we can talk to the public, and we can run you through the presentation. We can point to bits on our screens and show you the plans, show you the proposals, but we can also get feedback from you. So although you can't speak to us through the screen at the moment, there is a chat feature on the right hand side of the web page. You'll see some comments from me already welcoming you along tonight. You can type there. There's a button for adding your name. So if you want to identify yourself, you can. You can put any questions there, and myself and Andy will respond to those. As you scroll down on that website, there's a bit of a description about the project, a bit about the ILI group where myself and Andy work. There's a little bit about why this project's needed and why it's located where it is. There's also a site layout, location plan, some drawings there, and a PAN questionnaire, which we would encourage you to fill out. So that gives us some feedback, and we can try and incorporate that feedback into the presentation. Sorry, not into the presentation, into the proposals, if we can. If there's any recommendations from members of the public, we'll try and incorporate those into the final design. Now, when the planning application is ready to be submitted to the council, when the drawings are finalised, that gets submitted to the council along with a report from us to say what public consultations we undertook. We'll mention that we had this event, and we'll record if anyone attended, how many people attended, and the type of comments and feedback that we received. Then it gets submitted to planning, and neighbours will be notified by the local authority, and it also gets advertised in the local paper, and the project appears on the council's planning portal in the normal fashion. So it will be there, it will be in the public domain. People can have a look, and you can also make representations to the council if you want to do so. I think it's worth pointing out that any representations that you make to us over the course of this public consultation process, they'll be recorded by us in in the report that accompanies the planning application, but it's not the same as making a representation to the council. So if you have
Hi,
strong
Greg.
feelings, hi there. If you have strong feelings either way
Hello.
on the application, hi, can you hear me, Andy?
I couldn't hear you there for a second. Sorry.
Okay. So if you have strong feelings either way on the proposals, you should still contact the planning department through the planning portal and make your representations there, and that will ensure that the planners, the planning officers for the council, and also the elected members will be made aware of your comments and take those into consideration when they're considering the application.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, I think with that, I'll just start with starting at the presentation. We might want to start looking at maybe changing these times slightly.
Yeah, we're running slightly behind, but we'll go through this.
We'll see where we're at.
Yeah,
No
I'll try not to interrupt this time. Okay.
Sorry. Okay, that's all right. So, yeah. So, what is the project? So, it's a 49.9 megawatt energy storage facility, and that's made of containerized battery storage. So, in effect, these are shipping containers that you've probably seen on the back of lorries, 40-foot kind of containers that have all the kind of batteries inside them in racks. Similar to, I don't know if you've ever seen inside a data center where you see kind of racks and racks of servers. Inside of these containers, you can walk through the middle of them, and either side it's kind of racks and racks of small battery components that make up the full unit, the full kind of battery storage unit. So they've got the containers. You've also got associated equipment along with that. So that's sort of inverters and transformers, which I can talk about a wee bit later on. There's an access track. Pardon me. There's some 3-meter high fence around the whole kind of compound. Outside of that, there is some screening as well, which we're using existing kind of trees that are already there and adding to that to screen the project from the road. There's a small meter building which contains all the kind of equipment we need to take the power to and from the grid to the batteries. But there's I'll show you those. Those are the kind of bare bones of the development. But in effect, what all energy storage projects do is they store excess power from the grid. So usually that's power that's coming from renewable energy when it's not needed. So if you think about kind of wind turbines blowing in the middle of the night, nobody needs that power. What can happen at the moment is that those wind turbines get switched off, that power goes to waste, and the developer of the wind turbines is actually paid a premium to turn those turbines off. So we lose the power, and we also kind of pay to lose that power, if that makes sense. Which it kind of doesn't really, but that's kind of the way it can be at the moment, is that we can pay for power that's not generated. But what our projects like ours enable to be happening is that we can store that excess power. So instead of those turbines getting switched off, we can store that power and we can put it back into the grid when it is required. And this helps balance supply and demand for the grid. But I'll talk about that in a wee bit in more depth in a few slides' time. So that's the kind of general gist of what it is we're doing. Who are Intelligent Land Investment Group? So we're an energy storage development company based in Hamilton in South Lanarkshire. We started the energy storage side of things in 2017 with a mission to bring 2 gigawatts of energy storage to Scotland by developing 3 pump storage hydro projects. Now we've actually, our first one of those actually just got planning yesterday, Red John on the shores of Loch Ness. So that's been in the papers. It's today, it's going to be on the TV as well. It's quite a big deal for us. That's a big deal. It's a big infrastructure project. It's hundreds of millions of pounds in jobs and investment. So it's a great project that we're on the way to developing. We've got another 2 of those. Plus we've got a gigawatt of battery storage, of which Chrisswell would be part of. So all in all, we've got 3 gigawatts of energy storage planned, which is a lot of power that we're going to be putting, a lot of storage that we're going to be bringing available to Scotland.
It's worth putting that in context a little bit, Andy. Sorry, I know I said I wouldn't interrupt, but at the moment, the UK has the 4 gigawatts of storage.
Yeah.
And so what we're proposing is quite a lot.
Yeah.
But what's required on the grid, according to the National Grid, who's done an assessment of how much storage would be needed if we're to meet our net zero targets, they're looking at up to 40 gigawatts of storage. So there's still a massive amount and an urgent need for a lot of energy storage. And this project will contribute towards that and contribute massively towards our net zero targets.
Thanks, Greg. Cheers. Yeah, so that's a little bit about our company. So why is it needed? So as Greg was alluding to, Scotland's got an ambitious net zero target of 2045 to hit that. And to do that, we're going to have a bigger shift to renewable energy than we currently have. So the problem that we have with that renewable energy has been the problem since renewable energy has been first thought of, is that it's intermittent. So what that means is that we can't rely on it to meet demand. It only works when the wind blows, when the sun shines, and that doesn't always match up from when everyone puts the kettle on at EastEnders, for example. So what we've done in the past is we've used fossil fuel generators, coal and gas, and also nuclear to make up that difference. So when the times of low renewable production, but we need lots of power, we turn on the gas, or we turn on the coal and the nuclear. But what's happening now is the fossil fuel generators, these kind of larger plants go offline, as well as the nuclear as well, are going offline. And a lot of these the fossil fuel ones aren't being replaced, and the nuclear ones aren't being replaced either. So what that means is we're becoming more and more dependent on that intermittent power. And the way to get around that is to have energy storage. So energy storage lets us store renewable energy for when it is needed. So as Greg said, National Grid ESO have estimated we could need up to 40 gigawatts of energy storage by 2050. We currently have 4, so we need 10 times more storage than we have at the moment. So that's a big gap that we need to fill up. And that's what we're trying to do with projects like this. Now, Scottish Government Energy Strategy published in 2018 supports new energy storage capacity. So the Scottish Government are well aware that if we're going to hit those net zero targets, if we're going to have the amount of renewable energy that we're talking about, we're going to have a corresponding kind of rise in energy storage to go along with that. So why do we need it in this location? So the project at Chrisswell is located next to, close by to the Spango Valley grid supply point. And basically a grid supply point is a hub for the grid network. So it's where transmission power comes in on large pylons at high voltages. It gets broken down in that grid supply point to smaller voltages, out to smaller substations, and eventually down the wires to your house and to your businesses. So it's an ideal location to put that grid storage capacity in. But the problem that we have in Scotland is that there's not that many of these grid supply points in Scotland that have the capacity to put that kind of 49.9 megawatts of power in. So they're few and far between, and that's why we're at the location at Spango Valley, because we know the power capacity is available there. So this is the location plan. The next few drawings kind of give you, or more kind of planning drawings, give you an idea of what it is we're doing. So hopefully you can see, skipped a few there. So hopefully you can see where my cursor is moving, and that red line boundary there. That's where the project at Chrisswell is planned. So it's a rough grazing field at the moment beside the A78 Inverkip Road dual carriageway. We're around 2 kilometres from Inverkip, 2 kilometres from Braeside at the edge of Greenock, and the site's located close by to the former IBM site there at Spango Valley. The closest houses are at Dunrod Farm to the south and Whaleyard to the north, each over 300 metres away. So we're a good distance from any kind of residential properties there. So that gives you an idea of whereabouts in the world we are. This is a kind of zoomed in kind of planning drawing of what it is we're proposing. So these are subject to change, but this is kind of the general layout of the project. So if we have a look if you see the kind of green rectangles that are side by side, those are the storage containers that I mentioned. And if you have a look at the kind of blue sort of rectangles that are interwoven in between those are the transformers and converters. So there's 54 energy storage units, and there's 15 transformers and converters in between those as well. On the outside of those, we have, if you look at the pink line, that kind of is the size of the actual energy storage compound is the pink line, which is the 3 meter high fence that we're going to be putting up. 3 meter high fence that's on the outside of the project. On the outside of that, we have the existing hedgerows, which will be retained, and a belt of new planting of native trees is proposed along the roadside. So if you look at the kind of green hatched area I'm talking about here, so that'll mean that the project's well screened from kind of all sides from the road. And like we said, we're going to be planting trees as well on top of what's existing there already. So there's a track that goes through the middle of that project as well. If you're coming off the Dunrod Road here and down through the middle of the energy storage units either side. There's a small substation building as well. It's also involved there. So the energy storage units themselves are standard kind of size of shipping containers. So they're 13 meters by 2.5 meters by 2.6 meters high. And those contain those small battery units, like I described, of solid state lithium batteries, which have been used successfully across most other energy storage projects in the UK and worldwide. So the transformers and converters that are on the plan that were marked in blue, there's 15 of those, and they're roughly together, they sit together, and together they're of similar size to the actual energy storage units. So the power converters are the small cabinets that you can see there, and they're 1.6 meters by 1.4 meters by 2.6 meters high. And the transformers themselves are 2.7 meters by 2.5 meters by 2.8 meters tall. So from above, they actually look very similar to the energy storage units. The footprint of them is of very similar size. The substation building that we're talking about is a GRP building, so it's a glass reinforced plastic building, and that's roughly 10 meters by 6 meters by 3.2 meters high, and that hosts all the equipment that we need to take the power from the grid to the batteries, and from the batteries to the grid again. So this is the 3 meter high fence that we're proposing. Sorry, I skipped the slide there. This is the 3 meter high fence we're proposing with the security cameras, and outside of that is a 1.2 meter post and wire stock fence, which would be built outside of that, and outside of that again is the kind of screening that I discussed earlier. So that really gives you an idea of what the project is. I don't know if there's any questions that came up. Haven't seen any questions come up yet. Greg, have you?
No, there's no questions. But Andy, I did have one.
Yeah.
I've explained earlier that these aren't the final proposals for the planning application, and that sometimes as a result of doing the public consultations, we make changes to the scheme. But on the fence drawing, it says that it's a wire fence, so a weld mesh fence.
Yeah.
But the text says it's a wooden fence. So it's possible that we've just not determined yet which of those we're going to use.
Yeah, I think that might be the case, actually. I've just noticed what you're saying there, because those are the latest updated drawings from our consultant that he sent over this morning, so I hadn't noticed that. So so the
type of fence that will be used there, that will be on the final planning application that's made. And if the public had a particular preference for one over the other, and they made representations along those lines, then we could incorporate that. But we've not made all the decisions on this project yet. So there's no point in doing the consultation if we've got it all fully designed and we're just telling you what we're doing. The point of the public consultation is supposed to be to take people's views and to incorporate that in.
Totally. I'll update that on the presentation. That could be either or. That's fine.
But the final whatever's in the final submission, that will be what we've determined. And there can be different reasons for using different fences. So sometimes it's landscape, and sometimes it's noise. If properties were in closer proximity than they are at the moment, the timber fence can help with noise. Also, we're right next to a noisy road, so the noise impacts are going to be pretty small from this development at this location. So these factors do influence the details of the design. But just keep an eye on the actual application when it comes in, and you can see there what the proposals are. All right. So Andy, we've got another presentation in about 5 minutes.
So
well, 7 minutes. So I'll see you then.
see you then. Thanks, Greg. Bye-bye. Hi there, everyone. Welcome to our Chrisswell Energy Storage Project presentation and question and answer. I'm Andrew Hughes. I'm the PR and Media Manager for Intelligent Land Investments Group. I'll thank you for tuning in today to watch this. We also have our Planning Manager, Greg Templeton, on the call as well to help me do the presentation and answer any questions you might have. So this is what we do. This is the way we're doing these kind of public consultations as part of the planning process, is on this kind of online format where people can get involved. Normally what we would do, obviously pre-COVID, we would just book a hall and come up and see everyone and see everyone face to face. Obviously at the moment, with the way the COVID restrictions are, that's not possible. So we've been doing it like this for the last year and it seems to be working quite well. So you should be able to so go through the presentation. Basically, the presentation tells you a little bit about our company, about energy storage, why we need energy storage at all, why we need it in this location, and some planning drawings to give you an idea of what it is we're proposing, so you can see for yourself. So you should be able to see a question box on the left-hand side of this window where you're watching the video. So you can ask any questions you might have. If you can't see that, sometimes it doesn't show up in some browsers or mobile devices, my mobile number's on the screen there, as is Greg's and my email. So there's 3 ways you can get in contact with us, either through the chat box, through my mobile number, or by emailing me or Greg. So you can get in contact with us in those 3 ways as we go through this, or even after this if you want to ask any questions. The presentation slides ourselves should be uploaded tomorrow to the website, and you'll be able to download that and look at it at your leisure. There's also a PAN questionnaire below, so if you scroll down the screen, you'll see there's a sort of outline of the project, site layout. All those plans will be taken from the presentation, and those will be able to see those over the next day or so. Those will be pinned, and if you get to the bottom there, there's a PAN questionnaire. So we're asking for your feedback. We want to know what you think about the project. So if you've took the time to listen to this, you might as well fill in the questionnaire. That would be great if you could help us out. And that forms part of the final plan application. If there's anything we can change, we will. It makes sense. Just to let you know as well, any comments you make to us are not representations to the council. To do that, you need to wait till the planning application goes live, and then you can make a direct comment or to the council on through their website. So I think Greg is, I'm not sure if Greg's actually, if you can hear me or not, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the presentation.
I can hear you fine, Andy.
So I'll just make it full screen so it's easier for people to see the drawings. So yeah, so the first slide is, what is the project? So what we're proposing is a 49.9 megawatt energy storage facility, and that's made up of containerized batteries. So in effect, we're talking about shipping containers, the kind of containers that you see on the back of lorries, that kind of size, a 40-foot container that has been repurposed with batteries inside of it. So if you think about, if you've ever seen inside a data center where you see kind of racks and racks of servers, inside these inside of these storage containers, you can walk into them, and there, either side of them, there's racks and racks of small battery components that make up the full kind of energy storage unit. So I think there's 54 of those on the development, and those contain the batteries. There's also some associated equipment, so you've got like inverters and transformers that help break power down to and from the grid. And it's an access track. There's a small meter building. And there's also fencing and screening around the project. So that's the bare bones of what's involved in it. And I'll show you in more detail in the coming slides. So all kind of energy storage projects, what they do is they store power, excess power from the grid, and put that electricity back into the grid when it is required. And that helps balance supply and demand for the grid. So excess energy is normally, that's coming from renewable power that's being generated when it's not needed. So if you think about kind of wind turbines going in the middle of the night when no one's needing that power, or you might have drove by, like I know I have drove by many wind farms, and you see some of the wind turbines are spinning and some of them aren't. And the reason for that is that a lot of the time We don't need all the power that could be produced. And in those circumstances, what happens is the wind farm operators are paid to switch the turbines off and lose that power, and we have to pay for that as well. So that's not an ideal solution. So what energy storage can do is, instead of turning those turbines off, we can store that power and put it back into the grid when it is required. So that's kind of the rough idea of what energy storage does. So here are Intelligent Land Investments Group. So we are an energy storage development company based in Hamilton in South Lanarkshire. We started the energy storage side of things in 2017 with a mission to bring 2 gigawatts of energy storage to Scotland through developing 3 pump storage hydro projects. And the first one of those actually went through planning at Loch Ness, on the shores of Loch Ness. It's called Red John. It's a 450 megawatt development that went through planning yesterday, which was big news for the company, which is great. It's going to bring millions of pounds of investment and jobs to the area. And we're also doing 1 gigawatts of battery storage, of which Chrisswell would be part of too. So we've got a lot of energy storage on the projects on the go. As we know, it's going to be, it really is an area where Scotland and the UK really need to increase what they're doing. I'm going to explain that in this next slide. So why do we need it? So why do we need energy storage? So Scotland's got a target of net zero in 2045. And to do that, we're going to make an even bigger switch to renewable energy. But the problem that we have with renewable energy is the same as it's always been, is that it only works when the sun shines, when the wind blows. It's intermittent, and you don't really have any control over that. So in order to meet demand, what happens currently and what's happened previously is that when we don't have enough renewable energy, we turn up the coal or the gas or the nuclear to meet that demand. But as we move further away from fossil fuel generators, these large kind of coal and gas plants start to close down, as well as nuclear. We become more and more dependent on that up and down of that renewable energy. And to flatten that out, we need to have a way of storing renewable energy. And that's where energy storage comes into place. So National Grid, ESO, is an electricity operator, and they have estimated that to do that, we're going to need 40 gigawatts of energy storage by 2050, or up to 40 gigawatts. We currently have around about 4 gigawatts, so we need 10 times more storage than we have at the moment. So it's a big jump. The Scottish government are well aware of this. If they're going to hit their energy net zero targets with renewable energy, we're going to have a big rise in energy storage. So they're broadly supportive of energy storage projects like this one. So why in this exact location? Why is it we're at the farm at Chrisswell? And the reason is that the land's located near the Spango Valley grid supply point. And basically, a grid supply point is a large substation where transmission power comes in at high voltages, gets broken down into smaller voltages, out to smaller substations, and eventually down the wire to your house and to your businesses. So it's a major hub for the grid. So it's an ideal location to add that kind of 50 gigawatts roughly of energy storage. So the problem that we have though with that is that there's not many grids. There's a lot of grid supply points in Scotland, but not many of them have the kind of capacity available to connect that 50 megawatts mark roughly that we're talking about. So that's why we're at the land near that at Chrisswell farm. So here, the next few slides are going to give you an idea of whereabouts we are. This is what the projects look like. So I'll just skip the extra slide there. Yeah. So this location plan, hopefully you can see that okay. If you have a look here where my cursor is, we've got a red line boundary, and that's what the planning boundary is. So that gives you an idea of where we are. So it's currently a rough grazing field. It's beside the A78 Inverkip Road dual carriageway. We're around 2 kilometres from Inverkip, 2 kilometres from Braeside at the end of Greenock, and it's located beside the old IBM factory that everyone knows. It's just up the road here to the northeast of it. The closest houses are Dunrod Farm to the south and Rail Yard to the north, each over 300 metres away from the compound. So we're talking got a good 300 metres or so. It's a good distance away from any kind of residential properties. Apologies. So the next slide gives you an idea. This is the current proposal that we have. Obviously, this is subject to change, but at the moment we have 54 energy storage units in the project. So if you look at the kind of green rectangles, those are the energy storage units. And then every now and again you see there's a blue one, and the blue ones are the transformers and inverters that we need to go along with that. So there's 15 of those in total, 54 energy storage units. Outside of that, we have that pink, if you can see that pink line, that is where we're going to have a 3-meter high fence, which will contain the whole compound. So the actual compound itself is all contained within that pink line. Out with that, there's an existing hedgerow which is going to be retained. We're going to have a belt of new planting, native trees along the roadside, and those are going to be planted as large specimens around 1.5 to 2 meters high tall. So they're going to come in at quite a good height already, and over time they'll grow to screen the project entirely from the road. So that's what we're always trying to do, is make the visibility of these projects as the minimum we can. So there's a track that comes through. There's a track that comes through off the Dunroad Road there, through the middle of the compound, along to the substation enclosure, or the small meter building. And outside of that, there's a stock fence as well. So the energy storage units themselves, where the batteries are contained, are steel containers, 13 meters by 2.5 meters by 2.6 meters high. And the technology we're using in those is solid-state lithium batteries. So those have been used successfully across most other energy storage sites worldwide and in the UK. The converters and transformers, which were marked in blue in the previous slide, there's 15 of those, and those are roughly in size and shape the same as the energy storage units themselves. So if you have a look at the power converters, those are those kind of cabinets. They're around 1.6 by 1.4 meters by 2.6 meters tall. Transformers are the equipment that's at the end of the rows of those cabinets. Those are 2.7 meters by 2.5 meters by 2.8 meters tall. Together, the kind of footprint of those is very similar, like I said, to the containers. The substation building we're looking at, it's a GRP building. It's going to be roughly around 10 meters by 6 meters and by 3.2 meters high. And that's a prefab glass reinforced plastic building. It's going to contain all the equipment that we need to take the power to and from the grid. The fencing is a 3-meter high wire mesh fence. It's going to go around the whole of the project. So that's the current. Something this can be subject to change. Other projects we've used wooden fences wherever we think that's appropriate. And like I said, these are sort of us in the consultation stage. So these are subject to change. So you've got that 3-meter high fence where we've got some security cameras as well, and there's a 1.2 meter post stock fence outside of that as well. And further out with that, we have that screening proposal that we're talking about, which is going to form a large part of the actual compound. Will be screening and making sure that the visibility is as low as possible from most locations. So that really gives you an idea of the project, what it is we're proposing, a little bit about intelligent land investments, a little bit about grid and energy storage, why we need it, and what the proposals that we have at Chrisswell Farm. So if there's any questions, if anyone's got any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, that's great, and we can answer them. Or if you don't want to ask any questions, if you want to just give us your comments, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, you'll be able to see the questionnaire form. If you can fill that in, that would be great, and give us your feedback. But if there's no questions of that, I think we'll leave it there and come back at 4:45 for our next presentation. So thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.